Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Christ is in our midst.
你是好，Shelby。
This is the second part of our Jesse Tree series for Advent. Last week, I told you about King David. Now, when King David was very old, he appointed someone to replace him. Now, that someone was not his oldest son. And that created a little bit of a problem. It was his younger son by Bathsheba, Solomon, whom David wanted to be the king. And that only came after some great difficulty and some killing. It was a kind of an ugly time. But Solomon became the king. And when Solomon became the king, he prayed to God that God would give him the wisdom to rule the nation of Israel, the land of Israel and the land of Judah. That God would make him wise. And God said to him very much what Moses had told the people of Israel before they entered the promised land the first time. If you will keep my statutes and my ordinances and follow my rules and keep my commandments, then I will bless you, and I will make you the ruler of this people, and I will set your son on this throne. And you will be a lineage that's pleasing to me, and you will govern the house of Israel. And Solomon agreed to this, and God gave him great wisdom. And Solomon was able to do what David, his father, had not been able to do. He began in the 4th year of his reign to build a great temple there in the city of Jerusalem. The city of David, they called it, to God. Up until this point, the people had still been worshiping at the tabernacle, or even they had altars on high hills in various places. And now he began to build a great temple. And he had it built with enormous cedar trees from Lebanon and cypress trees. And he had the interior overlaid with beautiful gold all over the altar and all over the holy place. There was gold all over the walls. It was something to behold for the priests who went there. And at the same time, he had an enormous palace complex put under construction for the governing of his kingdom. And he had it cut out of enormous stones, and even more cedar, and even more cypress, and even more gold. And he had golden shields, big ones and small ones, made that would line the hallways of the palace, or of the palace of the cedars, the hall of the cedars of Lebanon. 300 enormous golden shields lined up all the way down this hallway as you walked down toward the throne of the king. And the throne of the king was up 6 steps, and it was made of ivory. And over the ivory was overlaid even more gold, so that when you walked toward it in the light, it would dazzle your eyes, and the shields would reflect the sun, and the effect was overwhelming. This was the throne and the palace of the great King Solomon, and he had thousands and thousands of workers working on this all of the time. 30,000 people in shifts to cut stone and wood and to fashion bronze and all of this. And it took them 13 years to make his palace and to make the tabernacle, the temple. And when the temple was done, they offered a great sacrifice. And Solomon again asked God to bless him. And God again came to Solomon and said the same thing he had said to him before. If you keep my commandments, if you follow my rules and my laws that I have given you, then I will bless you. And I will bless this people. And you will have a son on this throne after him and after him and after him. Follow after me and don't turn away and go after other gods. And Solomon agreed to this. And he said he would abide by the statutes and the commandments and the laws. And God blessed him, so that Solomon's wealth increased and increased, and his fame increased and increased, and the kingdom had peace. The kingdom was blessed. Every man, it says, under his own fig tree, blessed in the kingdom of Israel and in the land of Judah. And Solomon's wisdom and his wealth were so great, were so far-reaching. So many people had heard of him that even the Queen of Sheba, that great royal presence from all those centuries ago, came to see him and to see if what she heard was true. And it says that she was so impressed by what she saw, the dress of his servants, the tableware at his table, the splendor of his palaces, the food that was served there, that it said it took her breath from her body. And then she sat before Solomon and heard him issue forth his wisdom on all manner of problems that were brought to him, and she was flabbergasted by his wisdom, which went beyond even what she said she had heard. Now, we don't know whether she was there when the event that I'm about to relay to you happened. But this is one example of the wisdom of Solomon that's given in the book of Kings. One day Solomon was sitting on his mighty throne of ivory covered in gold, enjoying the way the sun played on the shields that lined the hall leading up to his throne. And two women were brought in, and a screaming, crying, fussing little baby. And as I said, I don't know whether the Queen of Sheba was here for this or not, but she might have been. And these two women and this little baby were brought up before the throne, and Solomon looked at them and said, "What is going on here? What seems to be the trouble?" And the women said, "O King Solomon the wise, we have a problem. This woman and I, we live in the same house. And we each got pregnant. And we each had a baby, and it's just the two of us in this house. There's no one else there. No husband. And we were sitting, we each had a baby at the same time. Now we were each laying in our own bed asleep at night, and we each had our baby in the bed with us. And in the night, this woman's baby died because she rolled over on it and it suffocated. And while I was asleep, she took her dead baby and she put it in my bed with me, and took my live baby and put it in her bed with her. And now she says it's her baby." And Solomon looked at the other woman and he said, "It's not true. It's exactly the other way around. That's my baby and she took it. She's saying it's her baby, but it's my baby." And Solomon looks at the baby, and as is often true with babies, it's not exactly easy to tell right away where it comes from. There's no mark. It's not easy. He can't see that it belongs to one or the other. And Solomon stops. And he doesn't say anything. He just sits for a minute, thinking about the problem. Solomon was wise because he knew not to always say the first thing that came to his mind. And he sat there and he thought. And then he looked over to one of his servants, one of his pages standing there, and he said, "Bring me my sword." And the servant ran out of the hall and came back very shortly carrying Solomon's sword. And he handed it up to Solomon. And Solomon put the sword between his hands, and he leaned forward and he said, "Now, bring the baby." And the servant brought the baby forward and he said, "This is easy to fix. Each of you says you're the mother. There's no way to tell which of you it is, so each of you gets half a baby. And he raised up the sword as if to cut the baby in half, who had been laid at his feet right there on the ground. He raised up the sword, and the woman who had talked first said, "Stop! Let her have the baby. She can take the baby. Let it be hers." And the other woman said, "Let me have the baby." And Solomon said, "Aha. This woman, who would rather give the baby up to spare its life than to see it killed, is the real mother." And the servant picked up the baby and handed it to the mother, and she went away with her child. This was an example of the wisdom of Solomon. He wasn't going to kill that baby, but he knew that a mother's heart would respond, and that's what he needed to see. And that is how he judged wisely. Now, I'm sad to say that Solomon went bad later in life, in a certain manner of speaking. You remember that I said that he had made a covenant with God. God had said, "If you keep my laws and my ordinances, then I will secure your kingdom." Well, Solomon had a real fondness for the ladies. He just was a great admirer of beautiful women. It also happened that back in those days that a marriage was a great way to secure an alliance with someone else, some king or tribal ruler. And so Solomon did a lot of it. He had 700 wives, princesses in his house. And I can only imagine the palace that he had to build for them. And he had 300 concubines, women who were not his wives, that he nonetheless kept around. And they all came with their own gods, with their own idols. And Solomon would build them little altars, little houses of worship, and sometimes he would even go out and he would worship their gods. Exactly the thing that he had promised to God that he would not do. And so it says in the 11th chapter of the first book of Kings that God raised up adversaries for Solomon. And in the end of his reign, there was trouble in the land. And after Solomon died, there was real trouble. Solomon reigned royally over Israel for 40 years, and in that time Israel had great peace right up till the end, and great wealth. And then it was his son Rehoboam who was to rule after him, and when Rehoboam was about to take the kingship, he called together the old men who had been advisors for his father and said, "What should I say to the people who have come to me and said, 'Your father was hard. He worked us really hard, and he taxed us heavily. How will you intend to rule?' What should I say to them?" Rehoboam asks. And the old men, who had some wisdom, said, "Tell the people that you'll be easier on them, that you'll be kinder and gentler, and that there will be plenty for them and peace." And Rehoboam thought about it, and then he decided that he wanted to get the opinion of some of the young men he'd grown up with. And so he called the young men. "What do I say to the people who've asked me this question?" "Ah, you tell them that your father's thigh is like your pinky. You're twice the man he is, and that if he drove them with whips, you'll drive them with scorpions." Well, that is exactly what Rehoboam did. He went out and he said, "My father's thigh is like my pinky." Oh, man. "And he drove you with whips, but it'll be like scorpions for me." And the kingdom split into two. And the people of Israel and the people of Judah were divided. Never again was the kingdom, the land of Israel and the land of Judah, one kingdom. From then on, it was divided. And when Assyria comes, some years later, the kingdom of Israel will be wiped off of the face of the earth. Next week, I'll tell you a different story from someone else in the line of Jesus Christ. God bless you all.